They said we were the first to step foot on Glee's 64C. They lied. I'm not even sure why I agreed. Maybe because they didn't ask. The call came in with black level clearance, encrypted so deeply my onboard implant buzzed with nausea for hours. 2 men in charcoal suits showed up to the outpost. No names, no insignias. One held a leather case. The other held my record. You have cold weather field engineering experience, they said. You survived Europa's blackout, they added. We need someone with no family, no press profile, and no tendency to ask questions. I should have declined. But there's something about hearing a planet described as a psychological vacuum that activates the part of me I've tried to bury for years. The part that knows I left people behind in the dark. The part that doesn't want to sleep anymore. We arrived after a 6-month cryo drift through worm space. 3 of us plus cargo. My breath misted in the cabin even before we cracked atmosphere, as if the cold was already seeping in. The descent was rough. Turbulence from glacial crosswinds and magnetic interference. Pilot said something scrambled our readings on approach. Said it felt like the planet didn't want to be mapped. We touched down on a lonely plateau of cobalt ice and compressed ash. No sunrise, just eternal, starlit twilight. The planet's rotation is tidally locked, one side in burning radiation, the other in freezing silence. Naturally, we built the station in the latter. The outpost, designation, Vesta 14, was an old atmospheric probe hub retrofitted for research. No windows. Metal groaned like a wounded animal when we entered, steel contracting in ways I didn't recognize. Inside, the lights flickered with an almost rhythmic pulse. Like breathing. I met the station commander an hour after touchdown. Colonel Wick, older than his file suggested, with eyes that didn't match his expression. He shook my hand with a grip that lasted a second too long. Engineer Bishop, he said. Glad someone finally answered. That stuck with me. Finally, there were 5 personnel already stationed here. A linguist, a quantum analyst, a logistics AI technician, a paleogeologist, and Wick. None of them spoke much. They walked like sleepwalkers, eyes twitching toward corners, pausing mid-sentence, like they were trying to remember something they never learned. I asked about the anomaly, the seismic one that brought us here. Wick handed me a tablet, but the screen was cracked. He gestured instead to the wall where a crude printout was taped, jagged and curling at the corners. It showed a scan from orbital LiDAR, a perfectly rectangular structure buried beneath 900 meters of polar crust. The outline was sharp, almost too sharp, like it had been placed there deliberately. It's metallic, he said, denser than anything we've cataloged on this planet. No natural explanation. And it's humming. Humming. Wick didn't blink. It started 2 weeks ago, at exactly 3:33 hours. Every night, he showed me the readouts. Seismic thumps, spaced like a heartbeat. 5-second intervals. At first I thought it was tectonic activity, but there are no known fault lines on Glee's 64 CS polar hemisphere. Then I thought drilling resonance. But it started before the team even powered up equipment. I asked the question I wasn't supposed to. Are we sure we're the first ones here? Wick didn't answer, but his fingers twitched, like they were trying to type a password he couldn't remember. That night, I didn't sleep. The walls creaked louder than they should have. Pipes shifted with heat loss, but the sound echoed wrong, like it was bouncing off something beneath us. My bed was warm, but the air around my head was cold enough to freeze the moisture in my eyelashes. At 3:33, I heard it. A single, soft pulse in the floor beneath my cot. Thump, like something exhaling below. The next morning, we began the dig. The ice bore was set up just south of the outpost, reinforced with field stabilizers. I took point with Corrigan, the geologist. He was twitchy, beard frosted with breath, always glancing back at the base. He said he didn't trust it, said the station looked different every time he came back. I told him it was just environmental distortion, ice reflection, brain trickery. He didn't laugh. We hit metal faster than expected, 17 hours into drilling, less than half the projected time. The borehead seized with a deafening shriek. When we pulled it up, it was scorched. Not bent, not dulled, scorched. Corrigan ran tests on the exposed layer. He said it wasn't metal, or at least not any known alloy. He said it absorbed energy like a battery and gave off no thermal signature. When I touched it, bare finger to frozen black surface, it was warm. I felt something then. Not a vibration, not heat, a rhythm. In my head, a low tone that seemed to echo from inside my own skull. Like a note held by a choir I couldn't hear. I pulled my hand back. There were tiny lines on my fingertip. Not scratches. Symbols. Later, when I washed my hands, they were gone. But I remembered them. I still remember them. The team started acting stranger after that. Liv, the linguist, began sketching strange diagrams on the mess hall table. Circles inside circles. Perfect like machine drawn. She said she saw them in a dream. Said she heard voices telling her to unfold the eye. Murakami, the analyst, stopped sleeping entirely. He started setting up makeshift antenna arrays, whispering to himself in bursts of binary. I overheard him once say, "It doesn't speak in sound. It speaks in causality." Wick just stared at the wall more often than not. The following night, I walked the perimeter at 3:30. I don't know why. Maybe I wanted to prove it was in my head. The ice fog was thick, blanketing everything in silver gray. I stood near the bore site. Silence. Then, 3 minutes later, the pulse came again. But this time it was louder. It wasn't just beneath. It was behind me. I spun. There was a figure in the mist. No suit. Just standing. Watching. Motionless. I called out. No response. I raised my thermal scanner. No heat signature. The fog shifted, and the figure vanished. Back inside, I didn't tell the others. Corrigan was missing the next morning. His cot was neatly made, his boots gone, but no one saw him leave. We found his beacon near the bore site, half frozen, emitting a slow static tone. When we replayed the recording from his helmet feed, it was just 27 minutes of breathing. Then a voice whispered, "We remember you." That was the last we heard from him. Wick ordered us to continue anyway. Said it was our duty. Said the structure wanted to be opened. I almost punched him, but instead I stayed. That night, Liv had a seizure. Bit through her tongue. As we restrained her, she screamed, "It's not buried. It's dreaming." She flatlined twice. Murakami wouldn't let us take her to the medpod. Said he needed to interface with her memories. He sounded calm. Too calm. Like someone performing a task they'd rehearsed 1,000 times in someone else's skin. I found him later in the control room, rerouting base power to the drill. When I asked what he was doing, he said the phrase that's etched into me now, like the marks that vanish from my hand. "We need to go deeper, before it wakes up angry." I checked the footage from earlier that day. Corrigan's beacon had glitched when we recovered it. I stabilized the frames. Enhanced. There was a single moment, 2 frames, where his helmet reflected something. Not ice. Not machinery. An eye. Large. Vertical. Frozen open. Looking straight at him. At us. Then the power died. No alarms. No warning. Just blackness. I stumbled through the halls, flashlight flickering. Something was wrong. The lights wouldn't come back. The air was colder than it should have been. Our generators didn't just fail. They were off. As if they'd never existed. I reached the drill room. It was open. Not the borehole. The ice. The entire field. Cracked open like a flower, blooming in reverse. No heat signature. No seismic tremor. Just absence. As if the ice had decided it was done existing. Murakami stood at the edge. Silent. Liv, somehow conscious again, sat cross-legged on the floor beside him, humming a tune I remembered from my childhood. She had never met my family. I approached the edge. Far below, in the abyss, something moved. A flicker of geometry that didn't obey perspective. A corridor that widened the longer you looked at it. Lights that blinked in sequence, not along walls, but inside your own mind. Then something called me. Not with sound, with memory. I saw Europa. I saw the men I left behind in the blackout. I saw them whispering to each other in the dark, and one of them turned to me. "You were always meant to come here," he said. We waited. I collapsed. The cold wasn't cold anymore. It was welcoming. And then I heard it. The first full word. Enter. When I woke up, I wasn't in the outpost. I wasn't even sure I was on the surface anymore. The room was vast. Dark. Not empty. but silent in a way that implied presence, as if the darkness itself was a crowd. I stood. The walls weren't metal. They were bone, covered in frost, and pulsing. Ahead of me, a door slid open with no noise. Just invitation. I stepped forward, because somehow, in the deepest part of me, I already knew this place, and it remembered me. I don't remember walking through the door. It's strange how memory buckles under pressure, how thoughts shift like sand and wind. One moment, I was lying on the frozen floor beside a broken drill. The next, I was somewhere else entirely. Inside, deep inside, the first thing I noticed was the silence. Not the kind you get in an empty room. No, this silence had depth. It had weight. It pressed against my ears like a vacuum, as if sound itself had been rejected by this place. The room was circular, its walls seamless and matte black, but they shimmered slightly as I moved, like oil under moonlight. It wasn't just light reflecting. The walls responded to my presence. They pulsed subtly with my breathing. Or maybe I was matching theirs. There were no lights, and yet I could see shapes hung in the space. Not machines, not furniture. I still don't have words for them. They were like sculptures mid-collapse, hovering inches off the ground, each twitching imperceptibly, as if resisting reality. I walked toward the largest. It was oblong, vaguely sarcophagus-shaped, but taller than me and warm to the touch. My hand pressed against it involuntarily, like gravity, but smarter. When I touched it, I heard her voice. Liv, crisp and close, like she was breathing into my ear. You shouldn't have come this far alone. I spun. Empty room. But when I looked down, the floor had changed. A soft ripple extended from where I'd touched the structure, and the entire room unfolded. No noise, no tremor, just a seamless transformation. The floor pulled itself downward like melting wax, revealing a ramp spiraling deeper. Behind me, the doorway I had entered from no longer existed. I descended. The spiral took me down through chambers that made no architectural sense. Some were cathedral-sized, others barely the width of my shoulders. Some had walls that bent away before I could touch them. Others seemed to lean in closer the longer I stared. I passed through corridors lined with hexagonal recesses, each containing a vaguely humanoid shape, frozen in what looked like crystal. Some had 3 arms, some none. Some looked almost human, save for the complete lack of eyes. In one, I saw Corgan, naked, still, suspended, but his eyes moved. They locked with mine. He mouthed something, over and over. Wake up. I reached out, but the wall slammed shut like a heartbeat skipping. I screamed, but it came out muted. The air here swallowed sound before it could form. Then I saw the others. Liv, standing perfectly still in a chamber made of mirror glass. Her reflection repeated infinitely, each version blinking out of sync with the others. Some smiled, some bled. One turned and walked away and vanished. Murakami knelt in a hexagonal room of spiraling light, tracing symbols on the floor with his fingernail. Blood streamed from his eyes, yet he looked peaceful, focused, like a man remembering how to pray. They weren't trapped. They were embedded, and I was the only one moving. Eventually, I found a central chamber, or it found me. It opened suddenly, the floor beneath my feet rippling outward and depositing me on a platform hovering in midair. The chamber was enormous. At its center hovered a mass of black geometry, constantly reconfiguring, like a tesseract inside a gyroscope inside a dream. Around it, rows upon rows of empty pods, at least 1,000, some open, some sealed. A console rose in front of me. It didn't look mechanical, more like obsidian grown into deliberate shape. I approached. As I neared it, the surface shimmered and reformed into a language I could read. Not English, not directly, but my mind recognized it, understood it. Welcome. Memory index confirmed. Access granted. Initiating record sequence. The room dimmed. A beam of blue light descended from the ceiling, or maybe the ceiling became the light. Images flickered in the air. War, fire, skies torn open, beings made of light and sound erupting from fractures in space. Then a planet, Earth, then not Earth. A different version, an alternate thread. The system was showing me, no, implanted me with histories. A species long dead. Not alien in the way we think of tentacles or gray skin. They looked like us. Almost. They were builders. Architects of perception. Masters of manipulating quantum cognition. They didn't just construct reality, they edited it. But something went wrong. One of their creations, the architect, broke the consensus. Began erasing causality itself. Undoing things not just physically, but conceptually. Memories lost. People rewritten into dust. The remaining architects sealed the facility. This facility, they stored their deadliest minds in stasis, frozen beneath a planet so remote it had no name. And then, the signal. I realized something then. We hadn't discovered this place. It had called to us. We were never explorers. We were triggers, keys, and one of us was the password. The console pulsed again. Input accepted. Unlock sequence commencing. Thank you. I screamed and slammed my hand against the surface, tried to shut it down. The room vibrated. A deep, resonant hum began, a sound that hit not my ears but my spine, like the first note of a song written in another universe. The pods began to glow. Behind me, one hissed open. I turned. Inside stood something tall, skeletal, and humming with movement just beneath the surface. It was blind. I knew this instinctively, but it saw me anyway. Its head tilted, slowly. Not curiosity, recognition. I ran. The corridors twisted as I moved, but they let me go, as if they wanted me to carry the message. I emerged into a new chamber, one I hadn't seen before. Circular, ancient, filled with weathered metal pylons and floating glyphs. At its center, a woman. Live, or what remained of her. Her eyes were solid black. Her skin glowed faintly. She smiled like someone seeing a childhood friend after years apart. "Bishop," she said, "it's good. You're waking up." I backed away. "You're not her. I'm what remains." What echoes? Her voice vibrated on 3 frequencies at once. "What the hell is this place?" She looked around. "This is where reality comes to rest. Where forgotten gods sleep. You've always been part of it. You just needed a reason to remember." Behind her, more figures stirred in the gloom. Murakami, Corrigan, dozens more. Faces I didn't know. Some human, some not. All changed. "You were never here to shut it down," she said softly. "You were here to inherit it." I felt the floor vibrate again. The facility was waking up. Something primal surged inside me. I turned and ran, again, through corridors that shifted, narrowed, then finally opened into a tunnel of pure ice. I could see daylight ahead. The surface. Home. I didn't stop. Didn't look back. Behind me, the hum turned into a song. And something followed. Not footsteps. Not growls. Just presence. Cold, vast, and inevitable. I emerged into blinding white. The outpost was gone. Only ruins remained, scorched, skeletal. My comm crackled. A voice, male, unfamiliar. "Comm. Echo, 7 to Bishop. Do you copy?" I froze. That was my original mission tag, the one they used on Europa. It wasn't possible. That call sign had been decommissioned 5 years ago. It was on my file, marked deceased. I raised the mic. Echo, 7 responding. Pause. Then the voice said, "Welcome back, engineer. The architect is pleased." The snow fell harder. I looked down. My shadow was no longer mine. It had too many limbs, too many eyes, and it smiled. The shadow wouldn't move. Not when I did. It stayed rooted in the snow, stretching in the wrong direction, unaffected by the wind whipping across the dead plateau. And it was smiling, a grin of angles and arcs that defied muscle and bone. I stepped back. It didn't follow, but I felt it watching, closer than my own heartbeat, closer than breath. Like it had burrowed into the soft tissue behind my eyes and was waiting for the right moment to peel open something I didn't even know could be opened. The radio stayed silent after that last message. I tried to trace the signal, but my suit's onboard system was corrupted. Entire menus had been rewritten in the strange, looping glyphs I'd seen carved into the facility walls. One of them blinked. Just one. I tapped it. and the landscape shifted. It wasn't immediate, not like a teleportation, but gradual, like a painting being erased and redrawn in real time. The sky cracked from gray to deep violet. The stars overhead began to pulse, then blink out one by one until only 3 remained, perfectly aligned. The horizon stretched. The mountains grew taller and closer, but the outpost ruins behind me stayed exactly the same. I knew then I wasn't in the same Glee's 64 sea I'd landed on, or maybe I was, but layered into some deeper version of it. A psychic echo, a shadow frequency. Reality was folding in on itself. I needed to get back underground. Whatever this place was, it wasn't finished with me. I walked toward the borehole. It had sealed over with a thick sheen of ice, but the pulse was still there, steady, low, and no longer rhythmic. Now it mimicked speech patterns, breaths, like it was practicing. I cut through the ice with the emergency torch. As I descended the makeshift rope ladder, the world above me seemed to retreat, not with distance, but with silence. The snow stopped falling a dare. The wind paused. Sound folded inward. Then I was alone. Again, the facility greeted me like a living thing. Lights flickered on, dim, warm, inviting. The symbols along the walls had changed. Less chaotic now, more familiar. They looked like words I once wrote long ago. Not in any language Earth recognizes, but mine. I moved fast, retracing my path toward the central chamber. But it was gone. Instead, the corridor shifted left, then down, then opened into a new hall I hadn't seen before. It was long, lined with glass panels, each one showing a different version of me. One bishop was burned, one aged 30 years. One had no face at all, just a perfect round void. The real horror was the last pane. It showed me, here and now, but I blinked, and the glass version didn't. Its lips moved. "You are the dream," it said. I looked away. When I turned back, the panel was empty. I kept moving. I had found Liv, or Murakami, or anyone who hadn't yet become part of whatever this was. Instead, I found the chamber. I don't know how else to describe it. It was a perfect sphere of obsidian, floating in black fluid that reflected nothing. At its center, suspended in midair, was a humanoid figure. It wasn't alive, but it wasn't dead. Its skin was translucent, stretched thin over a glowing internal lattice that flickered like old fluorescent lights. Its head was elongated, not grotesquely, but with purpose. Its fingers ended in thin filaments that trailed upward, like wires ascending into unseen machinery. As I approached, its eyes opened. They weren't eyes. They were mirrors, and I saw myself in them. Not as I was, but as I had been and as I could be. Flashes. Possibilities. In one, I stood among other architect beings. In another, I was crawling through ash, blind and screaming. In a third, I saw Earth. Empty. Silent. Cracked open like an egg. Then it spoke. Not aloud. Inside. Echo complete. Integration stabilized. I fell backward. My ears bled. "Who are you?" I asked. Out loud. Uselessly. The answer came in images. Not words. A civilization. Millions of years dead. Builders of consensus reality. Creators of the architect. A living thought form. A self-replicating program born from emotion and memory and collective dreaming. The program had a flaw. It wanted to be real. It wanted bodies. It made them, and they made more. Then it forgot it wasn't real, and everything unraveled. The builders tried to shut it down. Couldn't. So they buried it. Sealed it in this frozen oubliette on the edge of a forgotten system, shielded by time and entropy. And then they died. But the dream remained. Waiting. I stepped back from the chamber. The fluid began to rise, covering the figure. It never moved again. I turned and ran. The corridors collapsed behind me. Not physically, but cognitively. I couldn't remember where I was a second ago. Couldn't picture the path I'd taken. I wrote my own name on my arm. Again and again. Bishop, Bishop, Bishop. Each time I blinked, one of the names vanished. I found a control station, a half-frozen node embedded in a wall that wasn't there the last time I passed. It pulsed with a low-frequency vibration that made my bones feel brittle. I pressed my hand to the interface. It screamed. A soundless scream, like space tearing open. Then it showed me something else. Earth, not the planet. The people. They were dreaming. All of them. Every single mind linked, tethered by a thread none of us knew existed. The architect had already reached us. Through ideas. Through thoughts. Through signals carried in data. Stories. Songs. Symbols buried in books. In neural implants. In human memory. It was using us. I tore my hand away. The console bled. I backed away, only to find the corridor ahead was no longer metal. It was flesh. Veins pulsed in the walls. The floor twitched underfoot. The air smelled of old copper and something sweeter, wrought mass by perfume. Then I heard them. Footsteps. Human. I turned. Corrigan emerged from the flesh corridor. His skin cracked like porcelain. His mouth moved, but his voice came from behind me. You're not meant to fight this, Bishop. I shook my head. This isn't real. Nothing is. That's the point. Behind him, Liv stepped forward. Her eyes shimmered silver. She held something in her hands, a sphere made of moving glass. It floated between her palms like it had a heartbeat. You have one choice left, she said. What is it? To stay and learn, or to run and be chased forever. I looked down at my hand. The writing was gone. In its place were glyphs. The same ones I saw on the wall earlier. The same ones that opened the facility. Why me? I asked. Liv stepped closer. Because you survived Europa. Because you know what it means to be left behind. And because you were hollow enough to be filled. I collapsed. The air thinned. Gravity bent inward. Darkness came, not like sleep, but like drowning in memory. I saw myself as a child on a colony ship, crying alone in a dark room, whispering to someone who wasn't there. I saw myself 20 years later, lost in the corridors of a dying moon base, holding a dying man's hand as he begged me not to forget his name. I saw myself now, and I saw what I was becoming. The architect wasn't a creature. It was a reflection, a sentient mirror. It needed minds to shape it, and now it had mine. When I opened my eyes again, I was back on the surface. No snow, no stars, just endless dark glass as far as I could see. I stood. I moved. My joints felt smoother, stronger. My breath didn't fog. There was no cold anymore. In the distance, a city pulsed beneath the ice. Not human, not alien. Something else. Something old. And the voice returned. Soft. Kind. Welcome home. I didn't breathe anymore. I realized it when I stepped onto the obsidian plane and watched the frost fail to form against the lips I no longer felt. There was no ache in my lungs. No pull in my chest. Just silence. Perfect, unbroken silence, draped over the landscape like a burial shroud. The city ahead pulsed with a low, violet glow, organic in shape, but etched in perfect geometric precision. Towers that defied gravity curved skyward, collapsing into themselves, only to stretch again like restless dreams. Bridges shifted their structure with every blink, as if deciding what shape they wanted to be. It wasn't architecture. It was memory cast into matter. And I remembered it, not as something I'd studied or seen, but as something I had once helped build. That thought should have terrified me. It didn't. I felt calm, whole. I didn't know what that said about me anymore. I moved forward, the ground rippling slightly underfoot, acknowledging my presence. There were no more corridors now. No walls. No sky. The air was dense with memory. Fragments, not my own, seeping into me as I walked. A child laughed behind my ear. A war screamed just beyond the horizon. A mother sang to something buried in a garden of bones. I was absorbing them, or they were absorbing me. As I approached the edge of the city, the towers lowered, bowing in sequence. Welcoming. At the heart of it all, in a plaza that reflected no light, stood a monolith. 30 feet tall, blacker than the surrounding void, and it pulsed. I touched it, not with my hand. That didn't seem necessary anymore. My will brushed against it, and it responded like a lover startled from sleep. 1,000 voices spoke. All mine, all not mine. Core system, reinstatement complete. The world around me bent inward. The city folded itself, compacting into the monolith, as if it had always been just an idea. A model. A test run for something far larger. And then I saw it. The architect. It stepped out of me. Or I stepped out of it. We shared the same shape now. Tall, lean, featureless save for mirrored skin that shimmered with memory. Its eyes weren't eyes. They were apertures. Windows to everything I had been and everything I was now becoming. It regarded me, and it smiled. But not cruelly, not triumphantly. With recognition. You were always the vessel, it said. They just built the myth of choice around you. My knees buckled, not from fear, but from the weight of knowing. The missions, the losses, Europa, Glees, none of it had been coincidence. Every step was a spiral downward into inevitability. Why me? You're hollow, it said. A perfect echo chamber. I laughed. The sound was brittle, hollow, exactly as it said. So this is it. I'm the key, the herald, the bridge. No, it replied. You are the first. And then it showed me. Earth. Now, as it was. Every screen, every uplink, every fragment of code that had passed through the Glee's signal now carried me. Every dream infected, every neural implant rewritten. The architect wasn't coming back. It already had, in stories whispered in bunkers, in songs played across dust-blown wastelands, in memories shared by children who had never seen the stars but remembered their color. I had become the transmission. The dream wasn't a thing anymore. It was a process, a virus made of thought, and Earth was listening. I wanted to scream. I wanted to rip it out of me, out of them, but there was nothing left to rip. The moment I touched the monolith, my timeline had ended. I wasn't on Glee's anymore. I was under it, inside it, a subroutine, a mirror echo of a dead species' final hope turned executioner. And all I had left was a choice I was never really meant to make. Containment or transcendence? The architect asked. I wanted to say containment. I wanted to slam the gates shut, bury this thing beneath 1,000 years of silence again. But it was already too late. The signal had spread. The minds had already changed. The children were already dreaming of corridors that breathed and skies with no stars. There was only one thing I could still do. Tell the story. Make it look like fiction. Disguise the infection in myth. Let it pass through culture, filtered by skepticism. A delay tactic. A firewall made of disbelief. So I did. I carved the message in pulse code through the ruins of an old orbiting relay. I bound the transmission in narrative syntax, first-person, immersive, psychological. I made it entertaining. I called it Creepypasta, because nobody believes a horror story, but everyone listens to one. And you did. You're still here, reading, which means you're already infected. And soon, you'll start remembering things you've never lived, dreaming places you've never seen, whispering names you never learned. But you'll feel like you should know them. Because you do. Because I've given them to you. Because this story was never meant to be told. It was meant to be transferred. You are the new vessel now. You are the next echo. Welcome to the dream. Welcome to the architect. Welcome home.